time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, everybody, it is Bad Attitude Tuesday. Thank you for joining me. It is always a bad attitude on Tuesday, and this Tuesday is no different. It is June 23rd. I am very glad you are here to share this day with me. Let's get the Iran war out of the way. Same old, same old. Choose your adventure. Who do you want to believe? Do you want to believe Israel? Do you want to believe Iran? Do you want to believe J.D. Vance? Here's the, some of the major media that I read, they're not even putting this on their homepage anymore. You have to scroll down and scroll down and scroll down to find what they're saying about Iran today. Here's the New York Times. Mideast live updates. U.S. and Iran offer conflicting accounts of nuclear discussions. Okie dokie. President Trump said that there were highest level inspections of the nuclear stuff being agreed to by Iran. Iran said, no, actually, we didn't talk about that at all. Okay. So, choose your adventure. Who do you want to believe? J.D. Vance is negotiating for another day with the spirit of Jared Kushner. But if you look at all the pictures, Jared Kushner is in the background. Like I don't know, the ghost of Christmas past or something, kind of keeping an eye on things, probably making sure, we know Jared, he's making sure that any deal that's made has a line in there offering him a part of whatever it is they're talking about to develop this real estate. You think Iran would cut off a little, I don't know, coastline, maybe some land by the Strait of Hormuz, and let Jared put a luxury hotel there? What could go wrong? Oh, Marco Rubio's, he's not going to Switzerland to do the negotiations that are or aren't happening and things that are not being discussed. Marco Rubio is doing a tour of the Middle East because, he doesn't like J.D. Vance getting all the headlines. But, apparently there's only room for one of them in Switzerland, so he has started touring the Middle East, and he is telling them over and over again, no country should be allowed to charge for ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. Yeah, okay. Good for you. Good for you, little Marco. Like United Arab Emirates is going to have anything to say about this? Okay. We can tap our ruby slippers together as much as we want. Doesn't mean that what we are wishing for is actually going to happen. Israel is sometimes agreeing to a ceasefire in Lebanon, sometimes not. It comes, it goes. Donald Trump is desperate that they just stop fighting long enough for him to get something official signed. That's true. And Benjamin Netanyahu's not very happy about it. But when he's in a good mood, he acquiesces. And then if something ticks him off, he bombs Lebanon again. And they have to start all over. So anyway, Marco Rubio is going around the Middle East saying, oh, Iran's agreeing to this, Iran's agreeing to that. And Iran is saying, not only are we not agreeing to that, we are not even talking about that. Choose your adventure. Moving on. I say the same thing about Iran every day. Have you noticed that for weeks now? This person says this person says that. Who knows what's true because we can't believe any of them. Let's move on to something else. There is an incredible heat wave going through Europe. Temperatures during the day, 90s to the low 100s. The guy who's in charge of the French national rail system has said publicly, older people should not be traveling now. The Eiffel Tower is closed. And sadly, there have been more than 40 drownings reported in France, as they're saying people are trying to stay cool by swimming in dangerous or unauthorized areas. 40 drowning deaths. Schools that were open are closed. And, you know, in Europe, because they generally don't have a lot of the hot temperatures that we see here, there is very little air conditioning. There are hotels that have no air conditioning. So our good friend Joe Brancatelli, who writes the business travel newsletter Joe sent me, is saying, you know, if you cannot reschedule your trip to Europe, get in touch with your hotel. Is there or is there not air conditioning? And he said he recommends that people carry battery-powered personal fans and plenty of water. And maybe just staying in for the hottest part of the day. Some people are saying that these are the warmest temperatures France has seen in hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's not just France. Much of Europe is experiencing this incredible heat wave. It's the end of the world as we know it. Is this the beginning of the apocalypse? I'm not sure. Could be. Stay tuned. You know, today I feel is like the day of silly news. So let me continue on with more silly news. There was a report you may have seen that there's some Eli Lilly has this brand new weight loss drug that is supposed to be super duper strong, apparently stronger than anything else out there now. But it's not FDA approved, so it's not out. Except that certain reporters discovered that Eli Lilly had allowed this weight loss drug to be given to a 79-year-old man in April under compassionate use. That's where companies can get around the laws. You know, if something's not approved and a family or a person desperately needs it, they can give it to them under this compassionate use statute. So in April, there was a 79-year-old man who was given a high-powered weight loss drug. The only description that the reporters were able to get was that this was a guy who was highly connected. Let's put our thinking caps on. Okay. Probably not a CEO because, you know, most CEOs aren't still working at 79. Probably not a state elected official. Probably not a congressperson. There's only a handful of those who are 79 or older. Probably not a senator. Who could it be? Well, the obvious conclusion to jump to is that it was Donald Trump. The reporters have said late this morning that they reached out to the company over and over again to get the name of the person the drug was given to, and the company has refused to say anything. Late this morning, one spokesperson for the company said it wasn't Donald Trump. Pretty much, it wasn't absolutely a one-sentence statement, but it was close. Everybody seems to be thinking it's Donald Trump. It wasn't Donald Trump. End of statement. Okay. Let's think about this today. Somebody who was 79 in April, somebody who's highly connected and clearly obese enough to require a high-powered weight loss drug. You know, Ozempic's pretty high-powered. But this apparently is Ozempic on steroids, to use a drug analogy. So I don't know, maybe if something, the text line and the phone lines are open, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. If you have an idea who this 79-year-old would be, high-powered, well-connected, Mitch McConnell's still in the hospital as far as I know, but he's a thin guy, so chances are it's not Mitch. Oh, and that reminds me, senators, I don't know, maybe Mitch is out of the hospital because there's going to be a big meeting. Republican senators have asked Donald Trump to meet with them. John Thune and other Republican senators have said publicly that they are going to tell the president, they are going to make a strong argument with the president that the SAVE Act is dead. That's the SAVE Act, despite the fact that it says save. It's just another effort to really mess with voting. And it doesn't have the votes. Remember a while back, Donald Trump was telling the Senate, you should get rid of the filibuster. A lot of people believe it's because he knew the SAVE Act would never get 60 votes, which is filibuster proof. So he thought maybe it could get 51 votes. John Thune is apparently going to tell him at this meeting tomorrow that even without the filibuster, this is a dead issue. It is dead in the water. Bill Cassidy, the senator that Trump essentially pushed out of office by running a primary guy against him who knocked him out. Bill Cassidy was a co-sponsor of the SAVE Act. And he said that one of the things he's going to tell the president tomorrow is it's dead. It is dead. It does not have the votes to move forward. Tom Tillis, Bill Cassidy, and John Cornyn, who are all going to be losing their Senate seats. Thank you very much, Donald Trump. Thank you very much, Donald Trump. They've all said that they are going to be at this meeting tomorrow, where the promise is that the Republican senators will be speaking truth to power. Yeah. I'd like to think that was true. But what? We've heard things like this before. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. I have serious concerns about this bill or that bill. And then, at the last minute, they cave. Now, I don't see how they could cave on the SAVE Act because it doesn't have the votes. Thank God it doesn't have the votes. But apparently they're going to talk to Trump about a number of things because you know what? They see the midterms breathing down our collective necks, and they are worried. They are worried that not only is the Republican Party going to lose the House of Representatives, but they are now concerned that Republicans are going to lose the majority in the Senate. It wasn't believed possible 8 months ago because there are a lot of Republican Senate seats up for a vote this November, but most of those seats are coming from pretty heavily Republican states. And so it was always believed that even if Democrats took the House, that the Senate would stay Republican. And now Republican senators are terrified that that is no longer true. So they're going to have a chat with Donald Trump. You may have also heard Donald Trump, his announcement this morning that the reason that all the blue paint in the reflecting pool is coming off and floating up, the reason for that is there was a vandal who showed up in the middle of the night and ripped a line more than 300 feet long. And that's why the blue paint came loose. And Donald Trump said he's got it on video. Yep, he's seen the video. He didn't release the video. If you've got this video, and why wouldn't you share it? He's seen the video. This was vandalism. This wasn't me screwing up, giving a no-bid contract to a buddy of mine who may or may not have used the right kind of paint and may or may not have used the right techniques to put the paint on. By the way, the algae, that's a problem that the reflecting pool has had from time to time, regardless of the bottom. And most experts say that chances are the blue paint wasn't a huge contributor to that. They're also saying that, the hydrogen peroxide that was added to the water to kill the algae, that shouldn't have had any effect on the blue coating whatsoever. Because that was the other thing Donald Trump was saying, that the chemicals they're putting in the water. No, it's not that. My good friend Jennifer Schulze led me to a Scientific American article that was posted yesterday, where Scientific American talked to different experts on coatings and paints to find out what might have gone wrong. And they said that there was probably several factors about why it didn't stick. The surface may not have been prepared correctly. And when you're doing this kind of a coating, apparently you have to put as much coating as you're going to put on, whether that's one coat or two coats. You have to do it one right after the other, because otherwise it doesn't stick to itself like it's supposed to. So it's possible that the bottom wasn't prepared right. It's possible that the coating wasn't applied correctly. But regardless, there are big hunks of blue that are peeling off and floating to the surface. But if you are planning a trip to Washington, or you know anybody who's planning a trip to Washington, tell them to be very careful if they walk by the reflecting pool, because there have been people arrested. There's a little piece of blue floating by, and people have thought, well, this is kind of cool. I'll take it home as a souvenir. And when reports started going public that this was happening, that people were actually taking these floating chunks home with them, police were dispatched to provide extra security for the reflecting pool. And if you touch the blue, apparently you don't even have to actually remove it from the pool. If you just reach over and touch it, you can be arrested. Oh my God, the world we live in. You can't even touch it. Some of the things that I've read this morning say people are being advised not to even put their hand in the water of the reflecting pool because, it might look like they're touching it. And that's not allowed. Forget about pulling a piece out, and even a piece that's already free and floating. No. Donald Trump does not want to see your framed pieces of blue paint. He does not want this to be another humiliating embarrassment. But I think it's too late for that. Speaking of embarrassments, the court made him take his name off the Kennedy Center. And the workers not only put up a scaffolding to do it, but they covered the scaffolding with a tarp so nobody could see them take his name off. And there was some statement put out about, there's a little bit of damage to the marble and it has to be fixed. But again, the experts say that doesn't need a tarp. There is absolutely nothing, are there little divots from where the letters were? Probably. Do those divots need to be protected from the rain? They do not. Somebody, and I don't know who, but I appreciate them, snuck behind the tarp, which, by the way, also has had security guards. I don't know if they provided a distraction so somebody could sneak under the tarp, and they took a picture of the wall. and Trump's name is gone. The lawyers who fought for Trump's name to be removed are now, they said the end of last week that the guy who's CEO of the Kennedy Center, they said something like, surely this man does not want to go back to court over the TARP. Well, I'm guessing he does. Yep, I'm guessing he does. Mark Flokar, I believe his name is. And before he was CEO of the Kennedy Center, he was in charge of keeping it up, the mechanical stuff, making sure that everything ran right, making sure the toilets flushed, That was his job. Now he's the CEO. Yeah, he's the CEO now. Okay, I'm looking at the text line, and I am being taken to task, and I must admit, this is correct. I know that you want me to talk about the Epstein files every day, and I try. I really do try. But some days I get distracted. Some days it seems like by the time I get through all the big stuff that's going on, there's no time anymore. Todd Blanche is being taken to court in Florida and in New York. In Florida, he's being accused of something that is obscure to me and probably to you. He's being accused of perpetrating a fraud on the court, which is not something that's somebody's accused of very often. And that basically means that he knowingly, willingly, and eagerly, perhaps, told the court lies. And in New York, they're also going after him for lying to the court. And one of the things that they are going after him for is the fact that there was, remember, both houses of Congress passed the Epstein Transparency Act, back at the end of 2025. Do you remember back that far? And by the end of December, literally every one of the Epstein documents was supposed to be released. And they still haven't been released. They still haven't been. So part of the legal action against Todd Blanche in New York is saying that he has not fulfilled his duty. He has not released the Epstein files. And Pam Bondi threw him under the bus on her way out when she was asked in a committee hearing about the Epstein files. She was like, you know what? That whole thing, the Epstein files, what to do with them and what to redact and how to release them, that was all Todd Blanche. I handed this whole thing off to Todd Blanche. He was in charge of it. Now, I don't believe that. Donald Trump surely wanted Pam Bondi to do his bidding. Part of the reason it's believed that he pushed her out was because she didn't go after his enemies fast enough, and she also didn't do enough to stop the Epstein files from coming out. But on her way out of office, she threw Todd Blanche under the bus. All him, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, there's also a move in Florida that's been going on even longer than this fraud of the court. There is a move by lawyers and some judges, retired judges, to disbar Pam Bondi. And frankly, can disbarment for Todd Blanche be too far behind? Everything Trump touches dies. We know that. Okay, let's take a break. We're going to get to your texts and calls right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I did a little check on Mitch McConnell's health while we were in the break. He is still in the hospital, though John Thune, who was his sort of protege and is now leader of the Senate, says, he's talked to him. And he's very much aware of what's going on in the Senate and is letting his opinions be known. There's no word on when he's going to be out of the hospital. And apparently he will not. His staff already says he's not going to be on Capitol Hill this week. So, if something happens to Mitch McConnell, the person who fills that seat is the governor. We in Illinois, we know this. Because remember when Rod Blagojevich had an open Senate seat, and he said it was like gold, and he wanted to sell it to the highest bidder. Yeah, so we know that. And the governor of Kentucky happens to be a Democrat. So the belief is, in the cynical circles in which I travel, the belief is that they're going to try to keep Mitch McConnell, at least keep up the appearances of him being a functioning member of the Senate for as long as humanly possible. Who knows? Who knows? So, yes, thank you for the texts about Mitch McConnell. Thank you for the Epstein texts that have motivated me to mention Epstein again today. Let's go to the phone lines. Steve's on the line from the Gold Coast. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Fine, thank you, Joan. And I think you raised a few interesting topics, I mean, not the least of which is certainly this ongoing negotiation back and forth, because as you pointed out, it's difficult to pick who to trust, the Iranians or our own administration, i.e. Donald Trump, with regard to exactly where we are with this. And mind you, this is all tentative. And what you need to do is something that Donald Trump is fundamentally incapable of doing, which is, acting with some degree of humility and discretion. These kinds of negotiations require that, that you don't humiliate one another, that somebody is seen as getting something that they want on all sides. And, you don't stand there at every press conference and declare that, oh, we've gotten everything and they've been humiliated and reduced to nothing. And if they don't like it, we'll go back to bombing them. Oh, okay. What could that possibly do to undermine, the negotiation process? So, this is where we are. He wants to look like he won. We all know he lost. He knows he lost. The entire world knows he lost. This was a bad idea. We've come out with less than we had going in. It cost us over $100 billion. And where are we today? It's going to be a long time before oil prices and gas prices return to where they were before this nonsense. So he's got to frame it as something that it isn't. And of course, it doesn't do him, any good. The fact that much of this was leaked already. And, yes, they're going. You criticize Barack Obama for giving an infinitesimally smaller amount of money back to the Iranians, which was their money to begin with. And now it turns out that, well, they'll be getting money, and then there will be a fund established to help them rebuild the country that we helped destroy. A more hardline regime is in place. The dissident movement is in shambles. So that's not likely going anywhere in terms of a change of regime. They now know that the Strait of Hormuz is an asset in terms of what they can control in the region. So not only do they know that you don't actually need a nuclear weapon anymore. You have the Strait of Hormuz. So we've now given them the. So yes, but again, Donald Trump needs to stand up there and yell to his, MAGA devotees that that this is how we've won, because those people don't read, they don't care, they don't listen. So
there was some speculation that I read earlier in the week that part of the reason why Israel is so angry about this deal is because one of their concerns is this $300-some billion that we've agreed to give to Iran could very well be used to rebuild their military and their munitions.
Yes, and even if it's not, I mean, all that means is that if I give you $10 and you agree to spend it only on food, well, that leaves you with $10 somewhere else that you can spend on something else. So, I mean, either way, Iran has these resources. So if they want to spend other resources, because not as if they don't have any other resources, now that guess what? They get to sell oil on the open market again, which they weren't able to do previous to this agreement. So,
and I believe we've already allowed that. I believe the ban on them selling oil has already been lifted. I don't think that's something that's on the negotiation table. I think we've already given that sucker away.
Well, yeah, there was a short-term agreement that allowed them to do so. This apparently, and again, you get a lot of fuzziness because we don't know the actual, wording of any of this, that basically it's not in short-term anymore, that Iran's going to be able to sell indefinitely on the open market. So, okay, wonderful. So you've given them a means by which to rebuild the thing that you just spent all these months trying to destroy. So, again, wonderful, Mr. President. I wonder why nobody else decided to do this in the last 40 years. Oh, this is why. But, again, Donald Trump, incapable of doing it. I mean, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the reason that we were able to resolve that, why there wasn't a nuclear war, was because everybody agreed that, backdoor channels were used, and we would agree to withdraw our missiles in Turkey at a period after the Russians withdrew their missiles in Cuba. And everybody would be quiet about it. We wouldn't insult each other. And it wasn't until long after the crisis was resolved that the terms were actually revealed. But again, you have to have the capacity to be quiet and shut your mouth and exercise some degree of humility.
He can't keep quiet for 24 hours. I mean, he sent J.D. Vance to Switzerland, and he's already saying things that is going to make J.D. Vance's job 100 times more difficult.
Yes, and in the meantime, of course, and this was predicted, he's going to try and distract us with everything under the sun. I mean, if you weren't paying attention, obviously we had a bad weekend in Chicago with regard to shootings, and he chimed in, of course. So now he wants the FBI and the DEA to enter into this fray and see what we can do about this in Chicago. But funny, no ATF. The thing that people are actually using to shoot people in Chicago, firearms that a lot of them are, and a lot of them are coming from places like Indiana that have weak gun laws. Oh, well, we don't need the ATF. But, we'll bring in the FBI and DEA. So, again, anything to distract from his blunders around the world and domestically. So, it's more of this. And as you pointed out, things like the reflecting pool and so forth. I mean, for God's sakes, you're actually accusing people. They're arresting people with no charges. They'll be dropped like all the other charges. Yep. People who end up, caught up in these, go through some court and then within, one or two hearings, that charge was dropped because you were arresting people without evidence. There's no proof that people are destroying this thing. It was destroyed because it was improperly done.
Yes, it was.
There was a gentleman who was talking about it. He said, if you were to do this, that needs to be drained, and then for at least a month or two, under proper conditions, it needs to dry out. He said it's the same reason why you don't stain your deck in the middle of a thunderstorm, because it's wet. So, but they needed to get it done in time for the celebration. Well, guess what? That you can't defy the laws of physics just because you want something done.
Yeah. And Donald Trump is disdainful of any kind of science. So why would the science of a coding application be something he would pay attention to? It's ugly, paint it blue. Bing, that's it.
Yeah, and apparently it's costing us all of this money to get people out there. So now, in order to keep addressing this, so now we have a permanent staff, apparently, to deal with the reflecting pool issue, which is ridiculous. That you would need people out there every day, vacuuming it up, treating it, and so forth. And now we're adding surveillance equipment to make sure that the citizens of this country don't touch the reflecting pool or get near it. Because, but I mean, just bizarre beyond belief, But welcome to the Trump presidency. Let's hope that, we can get some of this behind us, and in the fall we can get serious, get to the midterms. And if we can win the House, that would be a huge bulwark against him. And if we can take the Senate as well, I mean, that's it. You're going to see so many people jumping off that train. Yeah. And all of a sudden, who's Donald Trump? I don't know what you're talking about. I
never knew him. And when, I never really liked him, and I never really believed anything he said. And, behind the scenes, I was working against him. We've heard it all before. Thank you very much. Steve, thank you so much for the call. Want to share one text from Elgin that I thought was particularly amusing. Bob texted in, if Trump is on a high-power weight loss drug, it's not showing. Ooh. Bob, you are actually correct. Somebody else talked about the arrests at the reflecting pool. If you forget about taking a piece of the blue paint that's floated up home or out, if you even touch it, you can get arrested. And somebody said they're being arrested for cleaning up litter. That's not far off. Let's go to the phone lines. Jim's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim, how are you?
Hi, Joan. A really disturbing story on PBS yesterday. Somehow the DOJ is going to tinker with the Disability Act. I don't know in what regard. And then Linda McMahon, the referee for wrestling matches, she popped up her opinion about schooling in the disabled. Now, in my mind, Project 2025, would like to give the tax cuts to the richest people in the country, and disabled people, the hell with them. But the point, but this is Barry. We got to keep our eye on this because this is just absolutely. I don't know what to say. I'm still stunned by it. When it was passed 40 years ago, the Disabled Act, and think of it, Joan. I mean, any one of us could be disabled in any moment. I mean, it's not. It's not.
And
like
for those of you who haven't read about what Jim's talking about, is there is a move to basically say, there shouldn't be any special protections or provisions for disabled people. They don't need any protections. They don't need any accommodations, and that shouldn't be the law. Yeah.
I know, but Joe, my God, but are they going to take that to this insane Supreme Court? Because I mean, I don't know. That's what they were alluding to. I don't know. I mean, these people are just apparently. I don't know what to say. It was passed 40 years ago. Anybody can be disabled, Joan. I mean,
that's
anybody.
Very true. That is very true. And as many of us get older, we are going to see, especially boomers, because we're such a big part of the population, we're going to see more and more people in wheelchairs. And there's not going to be any provision that if you want to get into a building that there has to be a ramp somewhere. Okay. What are you supposed to do? Get out of your chair and drag yourself up the steps? I mean, seriously.
I know. Yeah, but I'm not talking about kids, too. Kids that have a disability in schools. Why would Linda McMahon jump in on this? I mean, there's a woman who does. I've heard from her twice. She came to Chicago with some ridiculous outfit on and said some words, and I've heard from her since. That's got to be a year ago. And now she pops up with this disability thing in schools. What does she want to take the disability people out of schools? In other words, don't take them on buses or don't give them any choices. Don't give them any life at all. I mean, this party is
it's unbelievable, isn't it? You think that they've sunk as low as they possibly can, and then they surprise you by pulling back the rug, and there's a deeper basement yet.
And this idiot is standing with an umbrella over his head talking about putting another $20 million into the pool. I mean, while they're pulling rights away from disabled people.
But we don't have any money for Medicaid. We don't have any money for ACA subsidies.
No,
we don't have any money for that. We don't.
Well, we had it 4 years ago before this nut was elected, but apparently they got other uses for the money. Anyway, Joan, thanks for taking my call. That's terrible about disabled people. Thank you.
Appreciate that. We are going to take more of your calls and read more of your texts after we go to a break, but I want to say a special hello to our good friend Carl from Kankakee. He is recovering from kidney stone surgery. Take care of yourself, Carl. We'll be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
As we do for the first hour of the show every Monday through Thursday, we are reading your texts, taking your calls, talking about the news of the day. Ron from Chicago is on the line. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. In some parts of Europe, the temperature has already reached 110 degrees, and summer has just started. Yeah. And should we call the reflecting pool, start calling it Lake Dementia?
Oh, my God. It may come to that. It may come to that.
And Trump wants to take over Chicago, and he has taken over Washington, D.C., and last year they had the National Guard and the FBI and ICE agents, and last year that has all cost about $600 million, and compare that. Yeah,
what a waste.
And compare that to the total police force there, it cost $300 million.
Yeah.
And crime has gone. Some crime has gone down 25%, but really, and also Alan Greenspan and Clyde Davis have died, and the singers Frankie Valli and Pat Boone are still performing, and they're both 92.
Yeah. I read about Frankie Valli. Man, he is still up and around and going strong.
Yeah, and Pat Boone is with his daughter. They're going around performing too. So they're getting around.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you for the call. Always great to talk with you. Let us go to our good friend Dave, who's on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. to add to your bad attitude Tuesday, doesn't matter. Kentucky changed their law about 2 years ago, where the governor must choose a nominee from a list of 3 names the outgoing senator's party submits in 2024, regardless if it's a Democratic governor.
Really? I did not know Kentucky adopted that.
Yes, the state legislature passed legislation that would change how vacancies in the U.S. Senate are filled over objections of Democratic Governor Andy Beshear.
Wow.
And that, and that. So just add to your bad Tuesday.
Yes, that makes my attitude worse. Thank you, Dave.
All right, stoke the flame.
Thank you.
Yesterday I would have liked it, but there wasn't enough time to tell you about this story that I saw about Jim Jordan, everybody's favorite, linked to a group that received dark money from ICE detention contractor. The report found that American Liberty Foundation, a PAC tied to Jordan, last year received $250,000 in dark money payments from Geo Group, the Florida headquartered company that runs dozens of detention centers on behalf of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement across the country. That's one you ain't really heard much on TV.
That's shocking to me because he's generally such a fine, upstanding man. I mean, he really embodies moral character.
Yeah. Well, like I told you about Gabbard yesterday, one that was kind of quiet till today. Now that's come out. And also I've seen one where Utah is still battling measles a year after its first outbreak. So like more than 680 people have gotten sick since the state's first outbreak began in June of last year. And unlike outbreaks in Texas, South Carolina, and Arizona, the spread has been tough to contain to one region, infecting unvaccinated communities in nearly every county.
And, you know, measles is wildly contagious. Man, oh, man. It's an easy one to spread.
Yeah, and then I'll give you that. Like you were talking about that heat in Europe. Remember back in '95, we had that bad heat in Chicago, and I believe Europe.
We had
Europe
over 200 deaths.
Yeah, and I think all in all, I said that 5-day stretch that we lost 700 and almost 40 heat-related deaths and that. And Europe was in the same boat that time, like you were mentioning earlier, that no air conditioning really and stuff like that, and they were having a few of them drop. But and I'll close it out. Yeah, I'll give you the today in history today. Okay.
Okay.
It was in 2016. Britain voted to leave the European Union after a bitterly divisive referendum campaign, toppling PM David Cameron, who led the drive to remain in the bloc. How many PMs have they went through since then now?
In the last few years, I believe they've gone through 6. And, you know, I keep reading articles about how the United Kingdom is really suffering because they left the European Union in a number of ways, not just economic. There's a guy I follow on social media who is head of a group trying to convince the United Kingdom to get back into the European Union. And he says they have more support than they've had in a long time, but I don't see anybody being ready to put it to a vote.
Yeah. Of course, it depends how long the PMs will stay in power.
And, you know, it was so tragic because so many of the people, after UK had left the European Union and it had been a few months, so many of the people were, well, I didn't think it would mean this. Because, you know, there used to be, because they were all European Union, people just drove across the borders. They were able to do trade. And now all of a sudden, they had to have all these permissions and they had to have all these paperwork and everything was a lot slower and a lot more expensive. People had been promised that £250,000 that was currently being spent on the European Union would go into the national healthcare system. And then after they voted for Brexit, the government came out and said, oh, yeah, well, that wasn't exactly right. There's not going to be an extra £250 million. Sorry about that. That, you know, it was a little misleading. We didn't mean to, but we did.
Yeah. I just thought I'd give you a couple of that little bit of that news, the different stuff other than Trump,
Yeah.
and of course, on that PM, you had that one fool, remember, that Boris, whatever, that goofy one with the hairdo that was a Trumpy buddy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let me get off so somebody else can get through. But
Okie dokie. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Joan. Be well.
Let us go to one more call before we get back to your text. Paul on the line from Seattle. Hello, Paul.
Well, hi, John. Looks like
How are
I was
you?
right about the paint job. I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, sorry. Well, I'm thinking about the reflecting pool and what it's supposed to reflect. I think the way it looks now, I bet the Washington Monument looks like it could use a good dose of penicillin.
Oh, God, don't even joke about that. And, I think the Washington Monument is too high, don't you? Don't you think we should shorten it? Don't you think we should, go and take, 20, 30 feet off the top? Wouldn't it look better? Better proportion?
Yeah, well.
We joke,
you
but
start off by saying,
he could come out tomorrow and say just that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they'd start on it, too.
Yeah.
They'd start lopping. Yeah, they would. Yeah, it's just amazing that, somebody took a razor knife and vandalized the paint. Now, that just, you see what that tells you? It's what kinds of things are in his mind. That's what he would do. That's what that tells you. He's the kind of guy who would think of that. That's just it startles me that he, but no, actually it doesn't startle me about him. But, I just wanted to mention something because you started out by saying, well, there's nothing new today about Iran. And maybe you can mention this to somebody at the station there, but the AP top of the hour news has been the same since Sunday.
When I heard the news at 2:00, I chatted with the lovely Paul Shivari back at the studio, and I said, Paul, that's the same news as yesterday. And I've been getting texts about, do you know that you're playing the same news over and over again? Yeah. We are aware of the problem. Sometimes it is a problem with the Associated Press. But sometimes maybe there was a feed we missed, or the Associated Press is feeding us the same newscast. That has happened with CNBC, where for 3 days they'll feed us the same CNBC report. It's a very kind of spotty thing we got going here. But I'm sure Paul Shivari is going to fix it, aren't you, Paul? Paul Shivari, aren't you going to fix it?
We're going to hear NBC instead of AP next hour.
Well, there you go. Paul Shivari on the case, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul, I interrupted you.
Well,
what's got me?
That's okay. It makes me wonder how Trump was involved. But what I'm worried about is, and since we haven't heard anything about this, it's Wednesday in the last week of June. The last full week of June. We have not heard about, and it makes me worry, the Supreme Court ruling on birthright citizenship.
Yeah, they seem to be dragging their heels on that one. It doesn't make me feel safe.
Oh, it's already written, but usually I think these guys save the worst for last. And the thing that really, I think what people maybe are not aware of is that the implications, because the argument hinges around the clause of born in the United States or in the jurisdiction thereof, the United States, is a citizen. And the court is using this, at least the reports that the arguments are, that the jurisdiction thereof means that if you are from another country, that your allegiance doesn't belong to the United States. And therefore, any child that you may bear here is not a citizen because of the parents' allegiance. It's not of the United States. And so to point out what this really comes down to is there are really two types of birthright citizenship that are recognized worldwide. And one of them is, the first one is what we were founded on, and that is right of citizenship it's called just of soil, right of soil, just solely. It had to be the only way that the framers, the founders, could have become citizens, is that they were citizens of this land because they were born here. Otherwise, the other alternative is citizenship by right of blood. And if they were not citizens by right of soil, England could still claim that they were citizens and subjects of England. And as it turns out, the revolution said, no, we are citizens of this soil, and we are fighting for our right of citizenship of this soil. So if you follow this up, if you just toss this around in your mind, because it's a long discussion, of the dangers of what could be done if they decide that really when someone, a person who's not a citizen here, gives birth, and the United States decides that because your parent is not a citizen of this country and their allegiance does not belong to this country, which they're saying is not of their jurisdiction, which of the United States jurisdiction, which is ridiculous because you're in this country, and the reason we're arresting you is because you're in our jurisdiction, that they're assigning the citizenship of the child born by blood relation back to the other country of the parent. And that country, most countries don't accept that. In other words,
I think the Supreme Court better be careful. They're making a lot of decisions that go against the will of the people, and we get a Democratic president who suggests expanding the Supreme Court, and there is going to be huge popular support for that idea. So these Supreme Court justices better watch how far away from the popular desires, the desires of the majority they get. Paul, we got to get to the news. Thank you so much for the call. We are going to be right back after the news, talk to the lovely and talented Pat Kreitlow about all things Wisconsin.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
It has been a while since we touched a base with our sister to the north. That's Wisconsin, for those of you who are wondering, our sister to the north. And, of course, when we have questions about what's going on in Wisconsin, we turn to Pat Kreitlow, the founder and editor of Up North News. Mr. Kreitlow, how are you?
Joan, hello. It's so good to hear from you again.
Thank you. It is actually good to hear from you, too. It has been too long. I know that Wisconsin is a very lively state. We have to keep an eye on you up there.
Yeah, never bored. When you're at the intersection of news and politics, there's no time off.
No, absolutely not. Hey, I have to check the date. Oh, you just posted this yesterday. And then there were 6. The race in the Democratic primary, which is August 11th, people. So there's plenty of time. I don't know. This is going to drive me crazy waiting another month and a half for this to happen, but that's okay. We are talking about the Democratic primary for governor of Wisconsin. Please, Mr. Kreitlow, bring me up to speed.
Sure, happy to. We've got a primary August 11th. That's 7 weeks from today. And a general election in November, of course, that is 19 weeks from today. So we're under 20 weeks now to get there. 7 weeks till the primary. For folks who need a little background, our current Democratic governor, Tony Evers, is stepping down after 2 terms. And there is one Republican candidate, Congressman Tom Tiffany, from up here in northern Wisconsin. And there were 7 Democrats who were running in the primary, but one of them, Missy Hughes, exited the race yesterday and threw her support to the current lieutenant governor, Sarah Rodriguez. And so Sarah Rodriguez is one of the 6 remaining candidates, along with former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, State Senator Kelda Roy, State Representative Francesca Hong, and one of Governor Evers' former cabinet secretaries, Joel Brennan, and easy for me to say. And those 6, actually all 7 names will appear on the ballot because it's past the deadline. Missy Hughes' name will be there. But we're kind of used to that in Wisconsin.
Really?
We've seen some big primary fields, and people exit a little bit later in the game, and they end up getting a handful of votes anyway.
Wow. So that you don't think that's going to be a big problem, that
No.
voters are used to that? Oh, let's see. There's all these names on the ballot. Let's see who's actually still really in the race.
Yeah, there might be a few people that go, "Oh, Missy, that's a nice name," or know the name but didn't know that she dropped out. But again, she was not doing very well in the few polls that were out there. She did not receive an enthusiastic response at the Democratic State Convention a couple of weeks ago. And so she's the first one out. I sense there will be a couple of more yet before all is said and done, but those 7 names will still be on the ballot regardless.
When you say she didn't get an enthusiastic response at the Democratic State Convention, what precisely do you mean by that?
I mean, she didn't really build a base of enthusiastic support, and it's pretty clear to see why. She is, and some people think this word is pejorative. I don't, but she's a technocrat. She is somebody who has headed up Wisconsin's economic development efforts. She had a very successful private sector career, growing a very large organic dairy cooperative. And those accomplishments are wonderful, but to turn them into electoral success, having never run for office before, that's a very high bar to reach. And so between the fundraising and then getting out there and meeting enough people who have no idea who you are is very daunting. And she was hoping to, like a lot of long shot candidates, you hope to catch fire in some way, shape, or form. And, she just never did. You have other people with much more experience, running campaigns, gathering support in short order, like Francesca Hong has done, for example. But you always, in a pack of candidates this big, have a couple whose, dreams were bigger than their ability to make them happen, given all the competition.
What you're saying is very similar to what Michael Dorf, I don't know if you know him, he's a Democratic lawyer and strategist and advises a lot of people who are running for office. And I asked him because of the caps for fundraising are now off, there are a number of people who are jumping into the race for the Chicago mayor's race. And I was asking him because there was one woman whose name escapes me right now. She's a cardiologist, and she's also got an MBA in business, and she's run an organization. And she said that those two things, she knows people and she knows how to get things done. She knows how the world works. And that's sort of her explanation for why she's running for mayor, despite the fact that probably outside of an intimate circle, no one has ever heard of this woman. And I asked Michael Dorf, why does somebody do that? Because, doing a campaign, as you know and I know, it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of fundraising. It's a lot of organizing your staff. It's a lot of getting out there and getting your message across. And that's what he said, that same thing, that everybody is thinking that they might, he said Lori Lightfoot, when she first entered the race, she had 2.5% in the polls. And, sure, she caught fire. And he said, what they're all hoping is that somehow they will be the person who, for whatever reason, catches fire and suddenly moves to the forefront. I don't know.
We have that already in this race in State Representative Francesca Hong from Madison, who has not been in the legislature for very long. Certainly people like State Senator Kelda Roys and others, have served longer. David Crowley was a state representative before he was Milwaukee County executive. Mandela Barnes was in the legislature before serving as lieutenant governor. Same with Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez. But Francesca Hong, despite, having less experience than those folks, has definitely caught fire because of her go big, go bold, go brash, go with whatever swear words you want approach to talking about things. And in fact, it was about Fran Hong that I think Missy Hughes was talking about in endorsing Sarah Rodriguez yesterday, saying in so many words, we don't have time for a flash in the pan. We need people who can get the work done. And as you know, Joan, especially in Democratic races, there is always a natural tension between the people who are seen as more moderate because they believe in making incremental progress, getting done what you can get done. And then there are other people that say, get the hell out of the way. Let's get it all right now. Let's go for the brass ring. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, you'll just never get anything done. Well, if your voters have a real appetite for big change, they're going to be willing to embrace somebody who doesn't have as much experience, but has demonstrated she's not going to start small. Now, that's not me saying that she would be more effective as a governor, but the reason that she has the public support that she does right now is because she is quite confidently talking like somebody who would, walk into the governor's office and start taking names and naming names, as opposed to somebody who would have a bit more of a business-like approach. Now we'll find out what the voters want. Do they want the person with experience and patience, or do they want the person who, really wants to shake things up once they get in the door?
Well, you have described almost perfectly what happened here in Illinois for the Democratic primary for the open Senate seat that Dick Durbin is leaving. Everybody thought when Raja Krishnamurthy, he's been in Congress for a long time, he's done bipartisan things, he had a war chest that was monstrous compared to anybody else who got into that Democratic primary. And everyone was like, yeah, well, he's the front runner. It's like it's his to lose. And then we got Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who, much like Ms. Hong, was like, damn the torpedoes, Medicare for all. And, we're going to oppose Trump at every turn. And, sort of the, shall we say, passionate, some might say sort of an angry, but I would say passionate approach to the voters. And Raja never wavered. His approach was, I'm middle of the road. Exactly what you said, because one of the issues was Medicare for all that came up. Robin Kelly was, I support it. Juliana Stratton was, absolutely, I support it. And Raja said, well, if it was in front of me, I would sign it. But I think a more practical way to approach this is to maybe first let's lower the age. That's something doable. Maybe from 65, we lower the age to 62 for Medicare. And that was not what people wanted to hear. They wanted somebody, even though Juliana Stratton's resume was, to be charitable, thin, they wanted somebody who was going to get in there and kick butt and take names. And it sounds like that's what's going on with you guys.
It is. And, a part of the pushback to that, which is understandable, is to look at somebody like the current president of the United States, who also had no political experience and talked about shaking things up, and of course has been an unmitigated disaster ever since. And so people are saying, hey, look, experience should count for something. I think Senator Kelda Roy's probably had the most poignant line of all the convention speeches when she said, this is no time for a newbie. The way I often hear candidates with more experience say, this is no time for on-the-job training. Mm-hmm. We need somebody who has that experience. I'm sure David Crowley is saying the same thing about his executive experience in Milwaukee County. But, voters only weigh that to a certain level. They do appreciate these intangibles, like the passion and the bold ideas that you bring into a race. And so that's why I think things are going to stay rather competitive in this field all the way to August 11th.
Yeah, I think you're right. And if the comments that I get on my text line for this show are any indication, I can't tell you, Pat, the number of people who have texted in and said, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not going to vote for a Democrat who tells us to turn the other cheek and take the high road. She said they all said, I want to vote for a Democrat that is going to turn around and investigate the people who have been doing illegal things and prosecute the people who have been doing illegal things and hold them accountable. I think it's a real interesting mood, shall we say, that voters seem to be in. Do you get that reaction? I don't know How much
Yes.
feedback that you get to your articles that you write?
Oh yeah, and people again in that particular area, they want bold. They want action. They do not want to just turn the page and let's start fresh. If any candidate promised that, and right now none are, they would be almost jeered out of the room. But keep in mind that you can also go too far with that kind of rhetoric that is especially too far left or right for some folks. So to use Representative Francesca Hong again, she is someone who has said that in a perfect world there wouldn't be prisons. Well, needless to say, people jumped all over that in much the same way they jumped on the phrase defund the police. Now, in both cases, the sentiment behind it is admirable. It's let's put more resources into crime prevention. Cops don't want to be social workers, and we'd have less of a need for prisons if again we took care of things on the front end, education, healthcare, other things that prevent crime. But voters don't care about that nuance, and so Tom Tiffany, the Republican candidate here, has already jumped on that, and if Francesca Hong does become the nominee, you're going to hear all of the law and order rhetoric that says, Francesca Hong wants to open up the gates of the prisons when that's not what she wants. But sometimes when you're thinking out loud about what you'd like in the long term, it gets in the way of what you can really get done in the short term.
And unfortunately, these days, somebody running for office also has to think about how one sentence here or there can be taken out of context and used against them. I want to talk to you more about this sort of mindset of voters and how people running for office are and are not responding to it. I'm talking to Pat Kreitlow, founder, editor, Up North News. You can find it at upnorthnewswi.com. We'll be back right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Pat Kreitlow, the founder and editor of Up North News. You can read his writing at upnorthnewswi.com. And we are talking about the mood of voters and what they want from their candidates. And again, I'm going to make reference to the Democratic primary for Senate. Again, Raja Krishnamurthy, big war chest, lots of experience, definitely middle of the road. And I know that candidates have really accurate polling that they spend a lot of money for. They have consultants that are sort of trying to give them an accurate reflection of the voters. And yet the closest, because Juliana Stratton particularly was running all these attack ads against Raja. And his whole ad campaign was, hi, I'm Raja. This is who I am. This is how I grew up. This is what I believe in, kind of just a get to know me. The closest he came to responding to those attack ads that I saw was doing an ad that said, there's a lot of people saying a lot of bad things about me, but let me tell you who I am. I mean, that literally, that one line. And it seemed like he didn't understand what the voters in this moment in time wanted, or, because he didn't change his approach one bit. And I was always kind of puzzled about that you'd think somebody who really has their heart set on running for an office that's bigger and better than where they are would go out of their way to really have their thumb on the pulse of the mood of the voters. Like you're saying that attack, damn the torpedoes approach is resonating from Ms. Hong, who doesn't have as great a resume. And clearly, Juliana Stratton's message was resonating with people. And I was kind of surprised that Raja couldn't pivot, couldn't adapt. Do you think because of Ms. Hong's sort of in-your-face approach that any of the other candidates will perhaps adapt a little bit?
Well, perhaps, although from everything that you've described, what I see there is essentially a gamble, a plan that says, look, somebody is going to get a lot of attention for being brash, but the calculus they're making is that there are enough quiet voters out there who actually don't want that. They just want somebody who's going to say, hi, my name is so-and-so, here's who I am, and I'm going to get the work done for you. And maybe in some election cycles, that's exactly what the voters are looking for, is they just want the person who's going to get the job done. But I think this year, you're more likely to see voters, especially, independent voters, if you will, who are looking for somebody who's not going to take the safe and quiet approach. There is such a level of dissatisfaction right now with the way, things are going overall. The country's on the wrong track, the economy, and of course, all things Trump, that the calculus of being brash and wanting to go big simply carries more weight. I understand why you would go the route of, let's just try to be a normal person. Maybe people would like a normal person. It's just that some cycles, it works better than others.
But if I, as a radio host, looking at my text line, if I can get a sense of the passion and dissatisfaction of the electorate, how does somebody who has millions of dollars and can do all kinds of focus groups and send their people out into the neighborhoods, how do they not pick up on this? I'm puzzled by that.
Well, I would be as well if I had those resources to do, focus group testing and everything else that's out there. Again, I don't know who they're talking to. If they did focus group testing, did they do it in areas, that actually didn't reflect the overall will of the voting public? And again, there's just sometimes those things that are just very hard to measure. I mean, when push comes to shove across all of these Democrats running for Wisconsin governor, there's not a huge amount of daylight in between all of them, and when it comes to the basics on the positions. So it really does come back to, what do they want? What is the flavor that they're looking for? Are they looking for fighter? Or are they looking for experience? Do they want somebody that can give a good speech? Do they want somebody who can do good social media videos? It's why I wouldn't want to be anybody's campaign manager, because you can study things 8 ways to Sunday. And yet, as if we've learned nothing, Joan, over the past decade or so, is the voters are still perfectly capable of throwing a surprise our way now and then.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I agree with you. I wouldn't want to campaign, and I wouldn't want to manage a campaign at all. I just thought that what happened in Illinois was really, really interesting. And Pat, like I know, we've seen the research. Sadly, attack ads are very effective. People remember them. Even if there's a candidate being attacked that they like, it kind of makes them wonder, well, is this true? Maybe they're not the person I thought they were. And I think and Juliana Stratton, I watch a lot of shows that I record, and a lot of times I'm months and months behind. So I'll watch a show from like 7 months ago, and I see all the political ads. I mean, the primary's over, the election's over. And I was shocked at how many attack ads Juliana Stratton was running against Raja. Not only seemed like every show, but it seemed sometimes like every break. And he never responded in kind. Do you think that was a mistake?
Well, yeah, because, one of the things that, provoked me into running for office, leaving my TV anchor job and running against and winning against my state senator, was the 2004 presidential campaign. That was the swift boating of John Kerry, where you had, again, the lesson that was learned, John Kerry and or his team tried to take the high road against these vicious attacks by the swift vote veterans for truth, or whatever malarkey it was that they were peddling. And, Kerry and his team thought, well, if we just give this very measured approach, and if we just kind of ignore it, it will go away.
Yep.
And of course it didn't. And it inspired me and others to say, you got to get in there and you got to throw a couple of haymakers.
Exactly. Because what I've discovered, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life, is if somebody is really attacking you and a lot of people know about it and you don't respond to it, one of two things happens. Either it quickly and quietly dies a natural death, which is, I'm sure, what Kerry was hoping, or it starts to take on a life of its own. And people who know you and like you start to wonder, well, you know, he's not responding. He's not refuting this, you know, and that can lead to people thinking, well, you know, maybe there's some truth here. You know, he's not, you know, what's that, that saying, if you don't sue, we think it's true kind of a thing. Like if you don't fight back and something keeps building and building, then people are going to start to assume that there is at least some truth to it, if not complete truth to it, it seems to me.
Well, one of the basics of political communications and campaigns, candidates are told, don't try to respond to everything, because what they're going to do is they're going to keep trying to knock you off your message. You've got the message that you want to share, so stay on message and don't worry about the attacks. But as we have learned over the years, you know, if you just wish them away and don't address them, then yes, they do build. And so every good campaign has to figure out when not to respond, when to hold your fire. Don't respond to every little thing, because you do get knocked off your message. And when the time is there to either respond to something, or better yet, respond and counterpunch with something else. Because if the voters think you're a flyweight, you know, how are you going to fight for them if you won't fight for yourself?
Yeah. I'm reminded of the Kenny Rogers song, Know When to Hold 'em, Know When to Fold 'em.
Exactly,
Pat
yes.
Kreitlow and I have to take a break. We will be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm chatting with Pat Kreitlow, founder and editor of Up North News, a courier publication with all things Wisconsin, a state that is always politically really, really interesting. I want to know what the result was. You do a question of the week, and the beginning of June, your question of the week was about, I hate this name, but it's what everybody calls it, jungle primaries,
Yes.
where this is what we just saw out in California, where you know, whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, you're in the primary, say you want to be the next governor. It's not going to be one Democrat and one Republican who are chosen. It is going to be the top two vote getters. In this case, we've got two, for the mayor of Los Angeles, we've got two Democrats who are going to face off. But the worry for a while with some of these races was that there could potentially, if Democrats split the vote, there could be two Republicans and a Democrat not even on the ballot. You asked the people of Wisconsin if they thought that these kind of primaries were a good idea, and I'm really curious to see what kind of results you got.
So was I, because and one of the things we didn't really explain in our story over at upnorthnewswi.com was that we actually kind of have that already with our nonpartisan races in the spring, like state Supreme Court, where there could be, you know, two liberals and a conservative, or two conservatives and a liberal. They go to this primary in February, and it's the top two vote getters that advance to April. And that might be two liberals or two conservatives. But would you want that in your partisan races? And it was a very interesting breakdown, because we not only mentioned the open primary or the jungle or the top two, whatever you want to call it, but we also threw in what's called ranked choice voting.
I wish that was the law of the land.
Where, you know, again, people list their, let's say their top five. Let's say there's five candidates, rank them 1 through 5. And if your person, your favorite candidate, comes in 5th, well, they're eliminated. But then they go to your second choice, and then that person gets all the votes, and on it goes until you finally got just
And the
two
advantage
candidates.
to that for people who are confused by it is, have you ever gone to the polling place and there's like 3 or 4 people running for something, and you really, really, really like one of them, but you've been told and you've read that they don't have a chance of winning. So do you vote your conscience and potentially throw away your vote? Or do you do what everybody else does and vote for the person who is most likely to win? Ranked choice voting allows you to vote for the person you really like, and yet that means you didn't throw away your vote if they don't make it.
Right. You can then rank a second choice, but hey, maybe enough people rank that first choice that they get in. So we put that in there as well. And interestingly, what we got was only 6% said, yeah, let's try this open primary. Let's go that way. So it was a low number there. However, you had 28% saying, we'd actually like to try this ranked choice voting thing. And then another 32% said, let's do both. Let's do more. Let's do whatever we've got to do to kind of liven things up and give people a greater say in who their candidates are. And only 28% said, make no changes at all. So you had basically 7 out of 10 people responding. And again, it's a readership for our Thursday night newsletter that you can sign up for at our website. But, 7 out of 10 people who responded said, yeah, we should be doing other things that make the voters feel like, they don't have to just accept the two people that the two parties give us, that we can have more of a say in things.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because I think if people really understand ranked choice voting, it's a no-brainer to support it. But it never seems, I guess it has a toehold in a few places, but I'm surprised that it isn't the way every place votes. And I don't know what has to happen for that to be the case.
Well, what I thought might really do it, and yet I never heard anything after it happened, was when Alaska tried it for a congressional primary. And again, you had 4 or 5 candidates. And at the end of the first round, I believe Sarah Palin was the leader, but because so many people did not list her at all, but listed the other candidates, because you don't have to rank them all. You can stop wherever you want. And by the time they eliminated one candidate and then another candidate and then another candidate, you had somebody actually beat Sarah Palin for that congressional seat. And what happens when you do that is you no longer have this case where somebody, quote unquote, wins an election with like 24% of the vote. And instead, you turn it into a real contest where, again, by ranking your choices, somebody eventually gets more than 50%. And in that particular case, more than 50% of the people said anybody but Sarah Palin. I don't know why the ranked choice voting supporters weren't taking that and running commercials. And I mean, that is your poster child right there for getting support for something like that. And maybe it will down the road. You never know.
I saw a reporter talking to Sarah Palin after that decision. And may I say, if you look up shell-shocked in the dictionary, you're going to see her picture there. She was puzzled and confounded by what had happened and didn't really seem to grasp how this could be. How could this be? How could I be the number one and then lose? It was pretty.
It's so frustrating. Amusing. It's so frustrating because they're using it as a hook to feign outrage that the elections are somehow rigged. And how the other way that we see that, especially here in Wisconsin, is these late night shifts in votes where Republicans will say, hey, the Republican was winning, at 10 p.m. And then we wake up and we find out that in the middle of the night, the Democrat pulled ahead. There must be something wrong. No, what happened was the big cities where they are predominantly Democratic, it takes them longer to count all the votes. And once you count all of the votes, well, sometimes, the person who was leading early on isn't leading later. I feel like we should all know this. This should all be second nature by now. But in the Trumpian era, you've now got this convenient excuse to claim rigging that doesn't actually exist.
Well, and Donald Trump, because California, God love him, They go over their ballots very carefully, which is why, frankly, there are so few challenges after an election, because they verify the signatures. They're doing all the stuff they would do if this ballot was challenged, only they do it ahead of time, which is great. But it means it takes them forever to count ballots. And Donald Trump was like, oh, how could this be? My guy was leading and now he's not. It's got to be rigged. And it's been 3 days and he was ahead for 2 days and now suddenly he's not ahead. And it's like Donald. And the people at CNN, kept saying to him, well, and even Kristen Welker, this doesn't mean fraud. This is how California always, it can't be true. It can't be true. No, really, this is how it always works in California. Well, it's rigged. It's rigged. People.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
It is exhausting. I'm exhausted. So maybe this is a good time to take a break. I'm exhausted, but I'm going to continue my discussion with Pat Kreitlow about all things Wisconsin. He has yet to give me the Van Orden update, and we always have to have that. We will talk more when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Pat Kreitlow. He is with Courier Newsrooms. He is the founder and editor of Up North News. You can read all of it at upnorthnewswi.com. And we need our Derek Van Orden update. Come on, Pat. What's going on with my most interesting elected official in Wisconsin?
You remember when Don Rickles used to appear on the Johnny Carson show? And what was Johnny Carson's nickname for Don Rickles? It was Mr. Warmth. And I've now adopted that nickname for Derek Van Orden. He's Mr. Warmth, who, was your classic keyboard warrior who is addicted to Twitter and just hurls insults, night and day. And there's really not much in the way of cringeworthy conduct that I can talk about lately, except that when President Trump came right here to Chippewa County, Wisconsin, a couple of weeks back, there was Derek hooting and hollering in a way that was so animated. It did make people question, just how much you can be served on Air Force One. But to get to the substance of his remarks, and it's something that we jumped all over here, and we're going to continue to. He thanked the president for, the thing that's in the big bloated boondoggle, the thing with $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. But he thanked the president for the $50 billion that goes into some kind of rural health care infrastructure fund. And Wisconsin's going to get $200 million of that. And that's going to be great for rural health care, isn't it? And the answer is no, it's not, because, again, math. The math goes like this. If you're cutting $1 trillion from Medicaid over a 10-year period, as this bill does, if you cut $1 trillion, but you put $50 billion of that into a rural fund, well, take away some of those zeros, okay? Let's take it right down to this. If you get mugged and you're carrying $1,000 and somebody takes that $1,000 from you, $1,000, and they throw a 50 back at you for your troubles, did they do you a favor? No, they did not. That is what $50 billion is to $1 trillion. To cut that much and say, well, here's a 50. That'll cover things. It won't cover anything. There are rural hospitals all throughout Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, where hospitals and clinics are closing, or they're paring back services, or if they're not doing those things yet, they're nervous as hell that they will have to be real soon. And guys like Derek Van Orden are walking around going, hey, isn't it great that the president got us this $50 billion? No, not when you already are cutting $1 trillion and forcing people to go without health care, or forcing our rural hospitals and clinics to shut their doors. So, yeah, he tried to thank Trump for that, but, we weren't having it over here.
Good grief. And he's a congressman, so he's running in the midterms. How do you, I know that there are a lot of people in Wisconsin who have supported him. How do you think he's doing this time around?
That is the big question. And that is why Wisconsin's 3rd congressional district, basically southwest Wisconsin, western Wisconsin, a little bit of central Wisconsin, is going to be watched so heavily after the August 11th primary, because we have two different Democrats who are vying to take on Derek Van Orden, who has never won by a big margin in his two races, his two victories so far. And this one will be close as well. It is very much a swing district. But, you know, he is glommed on to Donald Trump, as has Tom Tiffany, understanding that he is an extremely unpopular president. But what other choice do they have than to just wrap themselves around him and hope that there are just enough voters that you can convince or you can scare that will vote your way. And so because this district is as closely divided as it is, you're going to see so much spending. You're going to see so much outside money come in. You're going to see all the groups come in. And the one thing that's, you know, not bad about that is that it will be that many more opportunities for voters to be reminded of the things that Derek Van Orden has said or done or voted for or didn't do. And when it really comes down to what have you done for your constituents, you know, again, when you're thanking a president for taking $1,000 and throwing back a 50-year way, it's something that may not necessarily go in his direction, but, you know, he's certainly hoping that, much like we've seen in past races here, like, you know, when Ron Johnson was running a few years back, that there's just enough billionaire money to drag him across the finish line.
You know, the problem with primaries is that, I mean, forget, you know, we always say how midterms don't get the turnout that presidential elections do. Well, primaries, it's even a smaller amount of turnout, which is why the people you can count on to turn out tend to be the real party faithful, the fanatics, which is why so many Trump-endorsed candidates are able to, like John Cornyn. You know, John Cornyn basically was undone by Trump. Bill Cassidy was undone by Trump because in primaries, the real diehards are the ones you can count on to vote, and they're the MAGAs. MAGAs are going to show up. That's been a problem in Illinois. What kind of turnout do you expect August 11th? Is it going to be the diehards or is it going to be bigger?
Well, there's not much for Republican primaries here on August 11th. You've got the 7 Democrats running for governor. You've got the 2 Democrats running in the 3rd congressional district. You have some key legislative races where there are Democratic primaries as well. So you may not see a big Republican turnout. And because the only reason they would is if they are trying to make mischief with the results. There are Republicans out there who are saying we should all go vote in the Democratic primary and vote for Francesca Hong because she'll be the easiest one for Tom Tiffany to beat, is what they're saying. I would argue that's not necessarily going to be the case here. But, you know, in terms of the Democratic voters who show up on August 11th, if we didn't have a 7-candidate primary for governor, I'd say that turnout would be relatively low. And as a result, the people who are maybe, you know, further to the left would have a better chance of winning because of that small turnout. But I think because you've got such a large field of Democratic candidates for governor and a wide open primary, it's going to be much more balanced. And you can't just say that, well, it's a primary, so only the most loyal Democrats will show up and the person closest to Bernie Sanders is going to win. I don't think that's going to be the case here this time around. That's good because then you won't get somebody, you'll get somebody who can in fact be extremely competitive with Tom Tiffany in the general.
Let's hope so. I mean, that's supposed to be what we do in a primary is we pick our strongest candidate. I read something in the Up North News, though, that puzzled me. It seemed counterintuitive. Meet the Wisconsin congressman whose pro-corporate agenda could sink the Packers, the Green Bay Packers, do something to hurt the Green Bay Packers in Wisconsin. Is this man crazy?
He's not crazy. He's just very reliably anti-regulation. His name is Scott Fitzgerald. He is a congressman from eastern Wisconsin. Previously, he was in the Wisconsin State Senate. He was the Republican leader while I was serving in the Wisconsin State Senate. And he has, he has never been shy about saying how he would like to get rid of, as many regulations on businesses as possible. And so he's looking at one particular regulation written in 1961, the Sports Broadcasting Act, and saying that, this is something that needs to be tinkered with. And he's doing it for what on the surface appears to be good intentions. He sees that all these football games from the NFL are going to streaming services that, have to be paid for if you don't live in the home market, meaning Green Bay. Well, at first blush, you'd think, well, good for him. He's going to bat for the old consumer here. But the thing is, if you get rid of that particular corporate, regulation that allows the NFL to engage in revenue sharing, then it's going to be every team for themselves. And I always use the baseball analogy because you've got the LA Dodgers, who, of course, far and away have the most lucrative TV deal. The Milwaukee Brewers, in the smallest market in baseball, have the smallest TV contract that's out there. And that's the difference between all the superstars that the Dodgers can sign, while the Brewers, have to always build from scratch every time. They don't have that in the NFL because of the Sports Broadcasting Act that says the NFL negotiates on behalf of all clubs and splits the money evenly. And if Scott Fitzgerald gets rid of that because it's a federal business regulation that he thinks gets in the way of, keeping football games from going to streaming services, the perhaps unintended consequence is that the Packers will have to find their own TV deal in the smallest market in professional sports. And, that will be the end of, look, it's not as bad as the Bears going to Indiana. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, that's what
here,
I was going to ask you about after we finished talking about the Packers. I was going to ask you to weigh in on our brouhaha, but finish your brouhaha first, please.
It is something that is not likely to happen. Let's put it that way. It is, no politician goes wrong shaking their fist at, streaming services and trying to sound pro-consumer. But because of the unintended consequence, there's really not an appetite to open up this particular law. But we thought, if you're still advocating for it, knowing what it could potentially do to the Green Bay Packers, well, I feel like the audience across Wisconsin at Up North News needs to know that. And so that's what led to that story.
Okay, now I'm going to put you on the hot seat. We do know that something is going to happen with the Bears, despite what Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson says. I think there is zero chance that the Bears are going to stay at Soldier Field for a whole litany of reasons. So, are they going to go to Arlington Heights? Are they going to go to Indiana? I don't know if you've been following the details of Illinois politics, but two other communities that you've probably never heard of have also said, hey, we've got 50 acres sitting here. The Bears should come here. And one of those communities, the city manager and the mayor or the village manager actually went to Hallis Hall with their proposal on paper to hand it to them. So it's like the Bears are kind of up for grabs now. Nobody knows where they're going to end up, but how do you think they are going to make the decision of where they are going to end up?
I feel like we are in an environment right now that, with notable exceptions like J.B. Pritzker, is such an anti-billionaire mindset, and I would argue rightly so, that I think that there is so little sympathy or empathy for anything having to do with billionaire ownership of an NFL team or any major sports team. We've seen this now for a couple of generations, where you put a state over a barrel, or you put a city over a barrel, and you shake them down for, the best subsidy possible, because otherwise, we're going to pack up and leave. And so I don't know much about these two late entries into things here. I know that Indiana is willing to forego a whole lot of tax revenue to attract the Bears. I would like to think that the residents in these other Illinois communities would not play along with, again, subsidizing billionaire sports owners. Ultimately, I think that if there's anything that state government can do to have a say in this, and again, I don't know the Illinois legislature, but I would not be surprised to see them do whatever they could to make sure that the Bears do not get some kind of a sweetheart deal, because you don't get to cry poverty. You just don't. This is a shakedown. Everybody sees it that way, at least here north of the border. And it's one of the few times, Joan, we kind of feel for you, because no fan base, not even the Bears, no fan base deserves this. No fan base should be put in it. So we stand here in Packer Nation with our Bears fan friends, in hoping that you don't have to bail out billionaires just to be able to keep your hometown football team.
Well, I thought J.B. Pritzker said it best. He said, we will do the same thing for the Bears that we would do for any big company that was going to locate a huge corporate headquarters here. We will do what we, for them, we put in sewers, we might build some streets, give them some curbs, maybe a couple of red lights or something. He said, we will do what we would do for any big business, but we're not going to just hand out taxpayer dollars, which I think is smart, because I think any official in the state of Illinois who advocates let's cut food stamps so we can give some money to the Bears, I think that's a death wish politically.
Oh, that is political suicide. And
yeah.
And I certainly know people who don't think that sports teams should get a dime, and I always push back on that. I said no, this is still about economic development. We saw this with the Milwaukee Bucks getting the Fiserv Forum built with some state help. But again, you look at it as you would look at any other economic development project. Now, Fiserv Forum is going to be draped in black for the next little while now that we've lost Giannis, but we'll rebuild that team again eventually, maybe even before the Bulls do. Who knows? But we do so smartly, and not just give in to the whims of sports owners just cuz.
Yeah. I think you'll definitely get it going before the Bulls. That's a sucker's bet, and I'm not taking it, Pat Kreitlow. Pat Kreitlow, Wisconsin is an important state. There's a lot going on politically, and it is a state we in Illinois need to pay attention to. So if you're interested at all, go to upnorthnewswi.com and sign up for the newsletter that Mr. Kreitlow founded and contributes to. It's got a lot more than politics, too. It's got some just regular fun stuff about Wisconsin. Pat, thank you so much for being here today. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, I loved it so much, Joan. Thank you. Take care.
You too. We are going to take a break for news. We will be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very happy to welcome to our airwaves somebody who is really helping try to get women back some autonomy by explaining exactly what this whole issue of abortion is really about. Hadley Duvall is here, and she's part of a program called Free and Just. It is a national organization where people tell their everyday stories of their reproductive journey. Hadley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tell me your story, if you will. You were born in Owensboro, Kentucky. Tell me about growing up.
Yes, so I born and raised in Kentucky, and growing up, childhood was good. If you were looking on the outside, we had a perfect family to what most people thought. But I endured a lot of abuse from the time I was 5 years old up until my teenage years by my stepfather. And so, that was really rough. And growing up, I didn't really know it started so young. I didn't know that it was even wrong until I was in like sexual education class. And that's kind of when a light bulb went off, was like, okay, what I'm going through is not right. And something, something needs to, something's got to give. And that's when I ultimately found my voice. And luckily for me, my abuser is in prison. Um, but then when the Roe v. Wade was overturned, that's kind of when I started speaking out more publicly about details of the abuse that I endured. And so that has, my childhood really, really carved that path for me today as an adult.
What was the result of this sexual abuse you endured at the hands of your stepfather?
When I was 12 years old, I had a positive pregnancy test and he had impregnated me. Um, and that was a very scary time. I just want to go back to 12-year-old me all the time and just give her a hug, because now I'm 24, I'm a new mom to a little girl. And so it really hits differently. Um, I I had Roe v. Wade. Luckily, I was 12 when this happened, and I knew what my options were, cut clear, laid out for me, and I miscarried, so I didn't have to go and seek abortion care, but I was going to. We had talked about. I knew that that's what I was going to do, and so now being an advocate today for women and girls in that situation is where I'm at, and unfortunately living my trauma out for everyone to see.
You know, a lot of states that are passing really restrictive abortion laws, in some places, they refuse to make an exception for rape or incest. What about your story would you tell them to try to make them perhaps see that decision in a different light?
Honestly, my story shouldn't have to be shared for people to think that women deserve basic rights, but unfortunately it does. And I mean, I would tell them to look at their daughters, look at the women in their life, look at their nieces, look at their friends' children. My story is not rare. There's just not a lot of people that talk about it because it's hard and it's not fun. It's not anything. I don't get a whole lot emotionally out of having to relive my trauma all the time. But I know that there are other girls and women out there who are facing this now in a post Roe world. And my heart goes out to them, because that is even more scarier than what I went through. And so I really try to tell people, could you look at your daughter and tell your daughter that they deserve to carry a pregnancy to term that was brought to them by rape or incest? And, unfortunately, Kentucky is one of those states that has a near total abortion ban. They don't allow exceptions for rape and incest. I've talked to our legislators. They don't care.
They really don't care. They hear your story and it doesn't affect them.
It doesn't. And I don't know how. I don't know how more vulnerable to get with anyone. I have always been an open book. My story is out there. Any question anyone wants to know, I will answer. And that's not easy. I dream of the day that women don't have to do this anymore. But unfortunately, we still have lawmakers today that will look at a 12-year-old girl and say, you should have to carry a pregnancy that your stepfather caused.
Has any of the legislators, you say you've talked to some and it hasn't changed their mind, do they tell you why they are continuing with the stance they had before? Do they give you an explanation?
Many that I've talked to, we've even drafted a bill. I had Senator David Yates in Kentucky actually drafted a bill called Hadley's Law, and our legislators wouldn't even assign it to a committee. They just like to say that their hands are tied, that's their best excuse, and that this is what the people want, which is so untrue, because every time abortion is on the ballot, it wins. And so I think our legislators know that it's not what everyone wants, but they're scared to lose their seat. They're scared to they think they're standing up for against something that's very controversial. But when it comes down to it, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, most people can agree that women deserve their rights. And this is at least an issue for the doctor's office, not for the politicians.
Yeah, that seems like a no-brainer to say a woman's medical decisions should be made with her and her doctor. And if the woman wants to include anybody, a husband, a pastor, whatever, that is her decision. The fact that we are legislating a medical procedure is just so repugnant to me. Tell me a little bit about Free and Just.
So, Free and Just is a national campaign to kind of collectively get women and people all around the country. It doesn't matter if you're male, female, non binary, you're welcome here in this space. And storytellers, providers, medical students. Unfortunately, this is something that is hit by more than just women. I mean, men suffer from this too. There are men who have to watch their significant others or their daughters or their mothers be denied care or be scared for their future because they don't know what their children's rights are going to be. They don't know, what the future holds, unfortunately. And so Free and Just is a space where we can all come together. We can lean on each other. We have a community. We can do things like what we're doing this week. And we're just speaking on Capitol Hill to, try to get some conversations going. And, that we have creators who work with Free and Just to get stuff out on social media. And it's an awesome campaign. I'm so amazed, like so lucky to be a part of it. And it just really brings us together. I think this week we have people from like 35 different states all sharing stories, abortion stories, horror stories, trauma, how women are being neglected when it comes to medical care is not rare. It's happening. It's happening to your neighbors. It's happening in everywhere you go. You walk past somebody in a grocery store, they've probably had to worry about where they're going to get care or where a family member can get care. And it shouldn't be like that. So Free and Just is just trying to bridge all the gaps, bring all of us together and provide a safe space for us to be mad and, be emotional but also use those emotions and put it to good work and get some things done.
That is a great organization, and we're going to take a break, Hadley. But when we come back, I want to talk more about what is going on Capitol Hill and who you're talking to and who's all there, and maybe some of the other people you've met through Free and Just. We are going to be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am speaking with Hadley Duvall. She's an activist who advocates for abortion rights. Part of what she does is with an organization called Free and Just, which is nationwide. And Hadley, you mentioned that you are going to be going to Capitol Hill. Tell us all about that.
Yes, so that's what we're here in DC for, is to, tomorrow being the 4th anniversary of the Dobbs decision, we are going to speak. We are all put in different groups so that we can have as many conversations as possible with as many people as possible. And so if they are a representative and they have been willing to meet with us or allow a staffer to meet with us, we are talking to them. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on. It doesn't matter their current stance on abortion rights. We are sharing real stories. We're speaking with them. We're doing some content. We are showing people that we haven't given up. We know there's still extremists out there fighting against us, but we are still fighting. It has been a very long, heartbreaking 4 years since the Dobbs decision, and we have continued to see women not receive the care that they need, be denied care, not be close enough to death to deserve the care that they need. And so everyone that has a story is here to share that story, speak with members of Congress, to just let them know, like, we are real people. We are your constituents. What can you do to help us? Why is this okay to you? And, hopefully we get somewhere. Hopefully we at least give them something to take back with them and think about, and maybe we'll get some policy drafted up.
Well, that would be ideal. Is this going to be, are the interviews going to be set up through the organization? You know, who you're going to talk to, when you're going to talk to them?
Yes, so Free and Just has taken the lead so graciously and has done all of the logistics and behind the scenes work. So they are putting us in groups. We'll go meet and talk, and everyone will have a different meetings with different people and different times, and it'll be a very, very busy day for us, but very worth it. As many people as we can talk to, as many stories that we can share, the better. And so it'll be a great day, but there are some members of Congress who have agreed to meet and chat with us. And so we're really looking forward to that. We hope that everyone comes to these meetings with an open mind and just is willing to hear these real stories. We're not here to argue. We're not here to attack. We're not here to get over defensive. We are here to speak our truth, to let members of Congress know, you might not see this, but this is what's going on. This is what we're experiencing. This is what the people who voted you in are experiencing across this country. What can you do to fix it?
Do you generally get matched up with Congress people who are supportive, or is there ever a congressperson who has been on the anti-abortion bandwagon who is willing to listen to your story?
I do believe that tomorrow there will be some members of Congress that, have leaned more towards anti-abortion, who have accepted a meeting with some of us. I don't know specifics or names or anything like that, but I do know that we are not just trying to target people who are already advocates for abortion rights. We are willing to reach across the aisle and say, we'll meet you where you're at. Will you sit down and listen to my story? And my thing is anyone that can sit down and listen to my story and really, really take it in has never ever looked at me and said, I don't believe you, this didn't happen. And so we can throw out statistics all day long, but when a real person who has experienced real trauma, real heartbreak, and at the hands of a Dobbs decision is in front of them, it really humanizes it a little bit more. And I can't stress enough that women shouldn't have to do this, men shouldn't have to do this, providers shouldn't have to do this, nobody should have to do this. This should be an issue for the doctor's office. However, politicians have decided to make this political, so now we have to come into their work and say, okay, you made this political, can you listen to why it shouldn't be?
Yeah. Recently, I interviewed a woman who was married, was pregnant with a baby that she and her husband wanted very much. And at something like 18 weeks, they realized that the baby either had passed away or had an unsurvivable problem. And they couldn't get any abortion care. I mean, they were told, there's nothing we can do for you. She apparently started to have a miscarriage, and even then it was a partial miscarriage. And the doctors, I believe this was in Texas, said, you're not near death, so we can't really help you out here. And she did eventually, within like 24 hours, become extremely septic. She was just infected her whole body. And that's when they finally took out the rest of the fetus. And she said that infection made her sterile. So she and her husband can no longer have kids. And I don't care how religious you are or how right to life you are, I can't believe that there's anybody who's going to look at a situation like that and say, well, yeah, it just happens. It's just, nothing we can do about that. It's just, there's such a range of different kinds of abortion care. And this isn't just, some people seem to think it's just, I'm pregnant, I don't want to be, it's inconvenient, I'll get an abortion. And it is almost never that. It is almost always a very serious decision, often made by people who really, really wanted these babies. And the whole right to life movement just doesn't seem to be willing to acknowledge that there is so much more to this issue than, just lazy people who see this as a convenient method of birth control, which I think is just so insulting and so very wrong. Tell me about the fact that, tell me about the pregnancy that you were able to successfully have later in life.
Yes, so last June, I found out that I was expecting, and it was, very emotional for me. It brought back a lot of memories that I thought I had been doing a really good job at healing from, and, just opened up a lot of old wounds. But luckily, I had a pretty healthy pregnancy. My baby girl is now here with me. She is 5 months old, and it's such a blessing to be able to have the choice of motherhood. It's very hard. And so many people ask me, does this change your stance? Like, how does this make you feel? And, the only change in stance is that I feel even more passionate now about reproductive freedom, because I could not imagine forcing anyone to go through a pregnancy, a delivery, and even like caring for a baby. Like, it is very hard, and I'm blessed to have an amazing village. I couldn't do it without my people, couldn't do it without my family. But what about the people that don't have that? And so like you said, there are many, many, many people out there who are wanting to start a family, and then they find out in these scans, you usually have an 18 to 20 week anatomy scan, and that's when you figure out that everything is developing correctly. There have been so many women wanted pregnancies, excited, they were trying to get pregnant, who go into that anatomy scan and receive the most devastating news. And when some people would be like, it doesn't matter, like that just happens. So they want women to be on death's doorstep, and that's so unfair. A woman shouldn't have to bleed a certain amount, or have a high enough of an infection to be able to seek care. And people think that, oh, well, if you really need it, your doctor will be able to give it to you. And that's not the case. Even providers are struggling to even understand what some of these laws in some of these states mean for them. Their license are at risk, but they're also here to serve their patients, and it's putting them in a really hard position. You're making people travel outside of their state to seek care, and then they could also be potentially prosecuted when they get home from doing so. It is a nightmare right now. And, I can't say enough how privileged and blessed I am that I had a pretty good pregnancy and everything was healthy for me. And, but I always knew if it wasn't, I had a plan. I knew where to go. I knew my resources. I knew who I could call. But not everyone has that. And that's who I speak for. That's why I do this work, because I too was once a little girl afraid to speak up, afraid of the world, afraid of what people had to say about me, didn't really understand what I had even been put through. And, it's devastating to know that there are women from all kinds of states with stories like the one you were talking about, a wanted pregnancy. You're not sick enough to receive the care, but your pregnancy is non-viable. So you either get sick enough or you can have a stillbirth. And, when something like that is going on with somebody's body, that should be private. That should be their decision. They shouldn't wait in a hospital parking lot to see if they've bled enough because they're afraid to drive home because they might die and not get back to the hospital fast enough.
Here in Illinois, we support abortion rights, and we actually had to pass legislation because there were certain states that sort of let Illinois know that they were going to, if a woman, say from Texas, went to Illinois to get an abortion, that Texas was going to try to prosecute that doctor because she's a resident of Texas and it's not legal. And so that Illinois doctor did something against the law. So we had to pass legislation to protect our doctors here from giving the legal care that they are allowed to give. I mean, it's really awful, and it is so anti-women. It is. That's how I wish people could see this. It is a power play. You know, a raped 12-year-old who's pregnant, you're going to make her carry the baby. Why? Why? There's just no reason for that whatsoever. And I really admire people like you, Hadley, who are willing to go public, because it's not always an easy thing to tell people about one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult time in your life, and how you survived that. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hadley Duvall, and the organization is Free and Just. We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with much more. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Jason Meissner. He writes very, very well for the Chicago Tribune, and he has been writing about all of the nonsense going on with our current U.S. attorney and federal prosecutors. We are going to talk to Jason about all of that when we come right back after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
One of the things that we have been talking about on this show lately is something that it's kind of a new phenomenon. As I've said repeatedly, there used to be this sort of credit that was given, believability that was offered to people in law enforcement, to prosecutors. There was this sort of idea that judges had that they were going to tell the truth, that they were going to follow the law, they were going to follow the rules, and that their word could be trusted. With the way things are today, judges are beginning to rethink those assumptions about who can be believed and who can not be believed. We've talked about this with regard to, the Broadview 6 and others, a lot of cases that are being looked at by the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is reportedly going back some 20 years to look at all the cases of Sherry Mecklenburg, the lead prosecutor for the Broadview 6, who I find it hard to believe did the misconduct that she did without Boutros knowing about it, but that's a story for another day. In the Chicago Tribune, there was a story that really caught my eye, having to do with an alcohol, tobacco, and firearms shooting case here in Chicago. Jason Meissner wrote about it in the Chicago Tribune along with Sam Charles. Jason is here now to talk about his reporting and to talk about this case. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Joan.
Where should we start? Start at the beginning. Tell us all the ramifications and what happened when with this case.
Yeah, the case you were just talking about, which was involved a shooting in Country Club Hills a couple weeks ago, where two suspects were shot during an undercover firearms transaction with an ATF joint task force. There were several people charged in that incident. And the U.S. Attorney's Office last week abruptly dropped those charges.
Always an interesting sign, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a sign of the times. This is different than the Broadview 6. This does not involve any allegations of wrongdoing before a grand jury, because this case hadn't even gone before a grand jury yet. It was charged by criminal complaint, so they hadn't sought an indictment. But what happened was a video surfaced from a bystander that through one of the accounts of the officers who shot one of the suspects, it was pretty clear that what he said happened didn't happen from this video, including that the person swung at him with his fists and then tried to run away. There was all sorts of things in the complaint that they realized either intentionally or unintentionally, we don't know, but were incorrect. So the remedy here was
tell me about
to drop it.
in the charges. Tell me about what that was alleged to have happened.
It was a kind of a chaotic scene where during this undercover the weapon sale, the people show up and they pull guns, and then the officers pull guns, and there was a chase involving one of the suspects. They're calling for backup, and other officers are arriving. So during all that, one of the suspects who ran was tracked down by one of the undercovers who was involved. He's actually a Chicago police officer who was detailed to the ATF that day in this investigation. There was a scuffle where they both end up on the ground. The officer has his gun in his hand. This is according to the video that was later surfaced. And the suspect is kind of trying to push away. And he actually stands up. And when he stands up, he's unarmed. And the officer fires a shot, and he falls to the ground. The suspect has been paralyzed, according to his attorney. And what happened was they filed a criminal complaint saying that the suspect, attempted to punch him, was hitting him, getting physically aggressive, and then the officer opened fire basically in self-defense. When the video surfaced, the punches did not happen. I mean, you can see very clearly. It's not like he was scuffling. So I think this is more of an abundance of caution, given what is going on with the U.S. Attorney's Office, that they dropped this case for now. Doesn't mean they can't file charges later on. But again, it is something that you rarely see in Chicago's federal court. And all eyes are upon them right now with the scandal. So this got a lot of attention.
Just to be clear, the video, that we're not talking about body cam video here. We are not talking about video that the police recorded or that the police were aware was being recorded. Wasn't this sort of a bystander video?
It was. It was shot by somebody from some distance. It's a little grainy, but yeah, it was somebody who lives there who saw what was going on and took out a cell phone and started recording.
In your reporting, you said that prosecutors who went to court to dismiss the charges made references to, quote, the front office. What's that?
It was an unusual filing where they repeatedly used the term front office, and when the quote unquote front office became aware of this video, and that the quote unquote front office assumed that the prosecutors handling the case already had it, there was some miscommunications, and allegedly, it wasn't realized till later that they actually hadn't seen this video. So there was that caught the judge's attention, and she called in somebody from the quote unquote. She wanted somebody from the front office to show up to a hearing, and they did. U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutrous' first assistant, Jason Joan, showed up to explain all this and why they were now motioning to dismiss the charges.
So are we to assume that the euphemism front office was what? Just because they didn't want to say, the U.S. Attorney's Office, or, because clearly that's what they meant. If the judge said, I want the front office to show up here and talk, and first assistant U.S. attorney shows up, that would make me believe that the front office is the U.S. Attorney's Office.
It's clearly Andrew Boutrous and his top staff. And in their motion, they did say that this whole video, they realized that there was a video when Boutrous and Joan were at a anti-violence seminar, and were talking to other law enforcement officers about what had happened, and that when they were told that there was this video. So it was a very unusual situation, to say the least.
When Laquan McDonald was shot, there was a video of that, which was pretty effectively suppressed for a while. And when it finally did surface, Rahm Emanuel, who was a mayor known for micromanaging, tried to convince people that he had never seen it. No, new to me. I didn't know about it. Nope, brand new to me. And I'm not sure anybody ever really believed him when he said that. Do you think that the judge believes has indicated one way or the other that, oh, this was just a mix-up? They thought that they'd conveyed this to the prosecutors and they forgot this incredible piece of video. They forgot? I'm sorry. It just doesn't seem very credible to me. And I know you're a journalist and you have to do just the facts, but I think this whole thing stinks.
Well, clearly it was unusual. I think because it was a bystander's video and not the body cam, they do have some leeway there where they probably wouldn't have seen it right away. But there have been accusations in all sorts of cases that prosecutors are, the standards are different. They're filing charges first. Look what happened during Midway Blitz. They charged protesters with things that later the video came out and none of it happened. People who were accused of attacking Greg Bovino, and it was later shown that he threw them to the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a charge first and maybe, get the facts later situations. To some people, that's the accusation.
Or charge first and hope there's no video that ever comes to light?
Yeah. I mean, in this case, it's not unusual that they would charge by criminal complaint when they've arrested somebody, with a crime in progress. But was there a full effort to go out, canvass the neighborhood, get any video you could get before you file those charges? That's what we don't know. The judge hasn't made any finding that anything improper in that respect was done. But, it's one of the consequences of having your confidence, the public's confidence in your office shaken, is that when something like this comes up, you're no longer going to get the benefit of the doubt like you used to.
Yeah. Jason, we need to take a break. I want to talk to you more about this. Talking with Jason Meissner, who recently wrote about a case where prosecutors ended up dropping charges because the video that surfaced seemed to indicate a different story from what they were first told. We are going to be right back after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with Jason Meissner, who's reported in the Chicago Tribune about a shooting involved in an ATF case where charges had to be dropped because the video that came to light didn't match up with the story that the people involved were telling. Jason, you said that the shooter was a Chicago cop who had been detailed to this federal agency. When a situation because I know that if you're a Chicago cop, there are certain laws and rules that apply to you when it comes to a shooting and certain protections. And it's a little bit different when you're a federal agent, the kind of protections that you are afforded. So in a situation like this, I mean, charges have been dropped, but should they have been pursued? If some charges surface at some point against the officer, will they be treated as a federal agent because they were on loan?
I mean, that's a very good question. I think there's multiple, because there was a multi-jurisdictional operation. We do know that there are multiple agencies investigating the shooting, including COPA, which is the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, which investigates Chicago police officers and uses of force, and also the Illinois State Police. We've heard the Cook County State's Attorney's Office is also, they have an investigation. We don't know, if it's just a routine. It is very soon after this incident, remember. And also they're saying the Department of Justice is investigating the circumstances of the shooting. So all that to say is we don't know. But there's going to be a lot more. There's already been a lawsuit filed in Cook County by the attorney for the man who was shot, and so that's going to go forward as well. We don't know if the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to bring forward the new charges. They can because the judge dismissed the case without prejudice, meaning
it can be refiled.
Can be refiled, correct. So that is all. We're waiting to see what happens next.
What's the timeline? If they are going to refile charges, would you expect it to be within the month, within 3 months, in the next year?
Yeah, I think because of the circumstances, I mean, this is an alleged violent crime, so they're going to probably, and I'm speculating here, but refile something fairly soon on a fairly quick timeline, rather than take months and months to investigate. This was the kind of the tail end of an investigation where they were doing this undercover buy. So they've been on it for months, and I'm sure have a lot of evidence already collected. It's just a matter of sorting out what do they do, whether they bring it to a grand jury or refile a criminal complaint. That remains to be seen. Last we heard, two suspects who were shot were still in the hospital, and one of them paralyzed. So they also have that.
And do you know the extent of the paralysis? I mean, is this a quadriplegic thing, or?
His lawyer said that he expects to be paralyzed. Yeah, for I believe paraplegic for the rest of his life is what he said in his lawsuit. So I mean, it's clear from the video that he was shot once in it looked like the lower midsection, and that's what we know so far.
I'm less familiar with how this legal system in cases like this works than you are, Jason. The person who was shot and paralyzed has filed a civil suit against who? The ATF, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the officer who did the shooting? How does that work? And if the charges are refiled, assuming that the man committed a crime, would that affect the civil suit? It would seem they would be related.
Yeah, usually in these situations, if the person who filed the lawsuit is also being charged with a crime related to the same incident, the criminal charges go forward. The civil suit is largely put on hold because you're dealing with the same evidence. Mm-hmm. But he sued basically the law enforcement agencies that were involved, not the U.S. Attorney's Office. And obviously, it's a very preliminary step because the shooting had just happened, less than 2 weeks ago. It's a very preliminary step to basically force them to retain any evidence. They're on notice. They've been served. They cannot delete anything, get rid of anything, and any videos that are out there. So it's really to preserve evidence. And then, if he's recharged, then probably the criminal case will go forward first.
We've had problematic situations in the city of Chicago before, but it seems to me, under current U.S. Attorney Andrew Boutros, there has been more talk or more accusations of misconduct on the part of people who should know better, either the people who are out there trying to make the arrests or the prosecutors who are misspeaking to a grand jury. Does it just seem like this to me because I've been reading about this every day? I mean, is this sort of usual that a U.S. Attorney's Office is embroiled in so many situations where they end up, dropping charges? And in the case of the Broadview Six, I mean, he's essentially said, we're going to investigate all the cases this prosecutor did to make sure there wasn't any other malfeasance. I mean, is it my imagination, or does this seem to be happening more often?
It's not your imagination. It's highly unusual. I've been in the building, covering the building for over 10 years, under 3 different U.S. attorneys now, and actually 4 if you count an acting U.S. attorney when I came in. But, they're unusual times. It comes from the top. We all know the stories about Donald Trump and his Justice Department. The U.S. attorneys serve at the pleasure of the president. They're nominated by the president, and they can fire them at any time. So Andrew Boutros is operating in that environment. he's a very competent lawyer, unlike some of the other U.S. attorneys who've been installed in other districts. He used to work in the office. He's respected as a lawyer, and I think people had hopes that he would stabilize things or keep things kind of walled off from all the other craziness that was going on in the Justice Department. What happened was Midway Blitz came to town. At least that's part of it. That's a big part of it. And he was suddenly thrust into a situation where, making decisions on charging people on the fly when that was all going on in October and in November. And there have been serious repercussions for his office, starting with, several cases that went down in flames before the Broadview 6, and the Broadview 6 case just being the latest and probably the most embarrassing because of all the grand jury stuff that came out about wrongdoing by this one prosecutor. But really, like I said, it starts from the top, and what we're seeing here is playing out in other districts across the country.
That's, I guess, kind of what I was circling around to, because when I heard that Boutros said that they were going to go back 20 years and investigate all of Sherry Mecklenburg's cases, it felt to me like he was making sure that, hey, this isn't me. I didn't do this. I just want you to know she was on her own. She was a rogue prosecutor. And it felt a little disingenuous. I mean, have you met Andrew Boutros in person? Do you have a feel for the guy?
Yes, I know Andrew going back to when he was a prosecutor, white-collar crime, mostly in the office, came up under Pat Fitzgerald, the famous U.S. attorney, prosecutor Rob Blagojevich, and all those other famous cases. So he was in the office at a time where they were bringing big cases. He left for private practice, and then came back with this opportunity. So I've known him for years. He's a hard charger. He says, he wakes the chickens up, or the roosters up, is what he told me. But, some people, he's rubbed some people the wrong way. Other people like his style. It's kind of a personal thing. But nobody questions that he's a competent lawyer. I think some people have looked at what he's done, and they see him, trying to toe the line of the administration when they were hoping that he would kind of defy the administration on some of this immigration stuff. But the reality is, if you defy the administration, you're gone. Yeah. So, and who are they going to put in his place? Could be somebody even, somebody with no experience whatsoever.
Well, they've already found a spot for Janine Pirro, so who knows who we'd get.
I mean, that's the worry, right? I mean, with everything going on, some people are calling for his resignation. I don't think they maybe have thought through what would happen if he did resign.
Yeah. And then wasn't there other one, Lindsay, somebody who the courts decided that she'd been illegally appointed to be
illegally appointed.
Yeah, she'd never tried a case and was making some serious errors in front of the judiciary. You're right. It could be worse. It could be much worse, right?
It can always be worse. But this is an unusual situation for sure. And,
that's kind of the byline for my life right now and this job and all the stuff going on in politics. It can always be worse. Jason, thank you so much for sharing your reporting with us. It is terrific, and I really thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. My
pleasure. Okay, that is going to do it for me today. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. Steve Goody, who's a comedian and singer-songwriter, the person who wrote Patty's theme song, is going to join her. And she's going to talk to the founder and CEO of Chicago's Pioneer Tavern Group, Mark Dmotrovich, or something similar to that. Tomorrow, Richard Chu is going to start our day at 6 o'clock. Going to talk to the CEO of Windfree Solar. He's going to have his regular contributor, Kurt Mullett, Hoosier Blue 63. And he's going to talk to Yusuf Jackson, a delightful man who is now the president and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition. So there is a lot to listen to tonight and early tomorrow morning. Tomorrow, I am going to be joined by two people I really enjoy. Aaron Kleinman, we are going to talk about all the primaries, and John Fugelsang is going to join me as well. So I will be here, but back at 2 p.m., but Patty is up next, and Richard will be starting tomorrow at 6 a.m. Have a great evening, my friends, and good night.